What's up, Nate?
Hey, Taki.
All right. I wanted to introduce my good friend, Nate. Wanted to bring him to the podcast because I know he got a lot to offer, a lot of information, not just about the bodybuilding, but just, I learned a lot um, personally for a long time. We've been friends for like, what, over 20 years?
Yeah, I was thinking about that today. I think since like 2004, like 21
Okay.
years.
Yeah, 20. Wow. I feel old. So, yeah. Learned so much stuff just about personal life and also you know bodybuilding stuff. So Nate is a IFBB pro bodybuilder, also a musician, online coach. Is a also own a gym in Boston, one of the best gym called Gym Hub. So Nate, you want to kind of take us through your I guess from your college time to like a high level and your career path and what are you doing? So
Yeah, I'll try to sum it up quickly. So, grew up in Maine, Lewiston, Maine. Came to Boston for Berklee College of Music, where I was just obsessed with music. Was a guitar player. Graduated with a guitar performance degree, and while at Berklee, fell in love with bodybuilding, weightlifting. Came into Berklee like 135 pounds and graduated probably like 190 and put on some muscle. When I graduated, I was in an original rock band and we were trying to get signed, but I knew I needed a day job and I didn't want to work at Guitar Center or teach guitar lessons. So the gym seemed like a cool change of pace. So I could do music at night, but have something during the day that was new and interesting. And I was a little burnt out of music all day long from college, music college. So that's where I started working at Bally Total Fitness, where we met, and was a
yeah.
trainer for 3 years, and then became a fitness manager for 2 years at a different location. I left that to have an opportunity to start my own business, where I was able to put my own company running the training in multiple gyms. So that kind of gave me a taste of entrepreneurship. And I did that for 3 or 4 years, and I got an opportunity to do a corporate job to be like the president of personal training of a giant gym chain. And I came in at 4 gyms, and we grew to 70 gyms. And so that was sort of my, unofficial business school, my MBA, of a kid with a guitar degree all of a sudden running a business that was doing $7 to $8 million a year. And I was really in
Wow.
the startup phase. We had no HR when I came in. We had no anything. It was just uh, here's 4 gyms. We're going to be building gyms month after month. Get them staffed up. Get them selling training, and we'll figure it out as we go. So we grew to $700,000 a month. I had at our peak over 700 trainers working for me, 13 regional managers, three regional vice presidents. So like we sort of split up the country in thirds, and each person had their territory. They reported to me, and I was often in a boardroom, talking about um, our projections and what the next 6 months would look like, and a whole lingo that I certainly didn't learn at Berklee. And so that was kind of my introduction to real serious business and scaling. And I really got an education there from our founder was, if not a billionaire, pretty close to it. So I did that for 5 years, and after that moved on to a business where I provided trainers to luxury high-rise buildings. I was living in one of them where all these buildings have gyms. They have a lot of people that live there that value convenience and go down to their gym to work out. So I came up with a company that provided trainers to those buildings, and I grew that to 8 buildings in the Boston area. And then COVID happened, and every gym in the Boston was very much shut down. So all the commercial gyms were shut down, but all the apartment building gyms were shut down. And I had certainly a stressful time of no income, no business, like things out of my control, nothing I could do. I'm out of business. But that bred the current project that I'm in, Gym Hub, and the hypothesis there, all of my stuff has always come from a what would I want? Where do I think there's a need? Hence the high rise business, right? I was living in those buildings, kind of seeing people, if they wanted a trainer, there was no way to get a good trainer. It's like really sketchy people. Taki, this field like I do. There's
Right.
most trainers in commercial gyms are terrible, let alone like people hopping around building to building. They're more bad than good. So I was trying to provide a solution to that of providing great trainers. So the current business, Gym Hub, came out of looking at saying, okay, all of these gyms are shut down in the Boston area. No one can work. Trainers can't work, but they need to. Clients can't work out. I'm guessing some trainers are doing like FaceTime workouts with their clients, like what do you have in your house you can lift? Let's meet in the park. Like people were trying to figure it out. And so I wanted to provide a space where when things opened up again, my hypothesis was the trainers that were working with the clients outside of the gym were now getting paid directly by the client and getting all the money, right? Where, like I do, these commercial gyms, they take like 60 to 70% of the trainer's money. And imagine having a period of, 6 months where you're getting all the money. Why would you want to go back to making 40%? So I wanted to build a gym that was for trainers where they could come in, run their own business, get paid by the client, whatever their rate was, pay a small fee to use the gym. Because Boston didn't have any independent gyms left. It was all the big Equinox, Planet Fitness, Boston Sports Club. And if you wanted to train there, you had to work for them. So I wanted to provide a place like a WeWork, but for trainers. You can just come in and run your business out of here. And as we built it, I kind of built my dream gym in the process as at the time a brand new IFBB Pro, handpicked all my favorite equipment, of like built my dream gym that I would want to train in. And that became its own draw because Boston really didn't have anything like this. And then through the relationship with Jose, then befriending Jay Cutler, kind of put us on the map as the Boston bodybuilding gym, as well as this spot for independent trainers where you can come in and run your own business. So that's kind of brings us to where we're at now in the business world.
Yeah, that's that's amazing. I mean, I think opening up business during COVID, that's probably the most scariest shit. The fact that you have actually got to do it, but it also shows like you actually had it well planned, and you know, you probably knew that if you execute it right, it was gonna work out. No trainer was working around that time, I remember, so that was a pretty well planned. Let's talk about a little bit of your bodybuilding career too, because I think that's also pretty important. Because I think as you are building up your business, you also are kind of in a parallel. You are working on that too, which I know, like when we are coming up, even on our 30s and stuff like that, early 30s, you are busy with doing that corporate gym stuff, and you kind of gave that up, and you know you picked up after you met Jose, and which was what, like when you were 37, 38, or a little bit
Correct.
later?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you might remember I competed, I was around 24 or 25.
Yeah.
And while I was working at Bally's, I love bodybuilding, did a couple shows. And at the time, I don't think I understood you could go on to national shows. Like I did one show, I got my butt kicked, and I worked so hard all year to come back the next year, and I won.
Right.
And that
Right.
sort of was like the payoff and the reward. And I don't even know if I knew, oh, I won, that qualifies me to go on to other shows. Like no one explained that, right? You and
Right.
I were both working with Ralph, and there was no roadmap of do this show, do that show. So I stopped, and then I focused on my career, which I'm appreciative of. But yeah, around 37, I was doing the high rise business, and I just felt complacent. Like the the big corporate gym thing had a level of excitement of next month we're opening up 3 more gyms, and there was just this growth where you couldn't feel complacent because the company was growing so much. You were often overwhelmed. And then I left, and I needed to slow the pace down. That was a little bit much. I had no life outside of that job, right? I didn't really have any balance. Um, so when I started the high rise business, it was a real focus for me to have balance in my life. One of the things I gave up during that corporate job was music. I couldn't play with bands. Every week I was flying to a different state. So in leaving the corporate job, there was an intent behind it of, I've barely seen my friends. It's been hard to maintain a relationship because I'm traveling all the time. I'm super stressed out. And I haven't played in bands. I haven't done music. I'm barely playing guitar. So I slowed the pace down with my career to be able to do these other things. But, maybe 4 or 5 years in, I felt very complacent. I wasn't really passionate about the career. It just was sort of, I'm good at it. I know personal training. I'm able to do this in these high rise buildings, but I also didn't want to grow it from 8 buildings to 10 to 12 to 20 to 50. Like, I just didn't have the desire for that. And so I started to feel complacent in my life. And I was sort of like, man, I miss going to the gym and training like an animal, like I used to in my 20s. That might be fun to do again. And I wasn't thinking about competing. I
Right.
just thought about giving myself a new challenge and kind of saying, man, I used to be in really good shape when I was 25. Why can't I do that again at 37? And let me look for somebody who will be way more advanced. At this point, I had been a trainer for well over 15 years. So it wasn't like I didn't know what to do, but I was like, maybe it'd be cool to train with like a pro bodybuilder to see what that's like and really be pushed again. And so that's when I met Jose. And my girlfriend was training for her first show, and she kept wanting me to compete, but I had no desire to do that. But in training with Jose, it was so intense, uh, like I'd never trained before, that I sort of was like, what if I kept this up? Like, I've never trained like this in my life. In theory, I could be better than when I was 25 because I never worked this hard. I didn't even know you could train this hard. So that's when I started on that journey with Jose. And you were at that first show that Christine and I did, where she won the overall of
Yep.
bikini. I won my height class for classic physique and took second in bodybuilding. And I thought I was going to embarrass myself at that show. I had no expectations that I was going to come in and kill it. So it became this like new thing that's like, oh, maybe I could be good at this. I didn't think I was gonna even make top five, and
Right.
I got first place in classic physique and second in bodybuilding, and I've only been back at this for 5 6 months. What if I put a year into it?
Right.
And
Right.
so it was something I was passionate about, that there was like so much upside looking down the road of, wow, if I really work hard at this, where could I go? And I didn't have that feeling in my career anymore, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
fell more in love with that, of like, I could make a lot of progress in this thing, and I wonder how far I could go if I work at it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, I would say, it was very inspiring just seeing you get back, you know, into the stage. And but that's also like for me, right? Like just to see you, because you are 1 year older than me, and just to see you like, try to compete in a even like bigger show, right? Trying to go to national and things like that. It just, I was like, okay, if you could do it, I'm not trying to become a pro, but I mean, at least I can, reach my goal. And I think that's how it started for me. I was just trying to reach my goal, trying to get into a shape. But I mean, you inspire me because of the age, because, at a certain age, you're like, okay, I don't have it in me. And you kind of like opened up. I mean, not that, I didn't see any other bodybuilders, older, but I think knowing you more on a personal level, it just kind of, it was like a whole different source of inspiration to, start my own journey. And, and just, now what I'm into, like this is the fifth year. Um, so again, I think, for you to, just to see you turn pro, that was like a huge deal. I mean, for me, just knowing you for 20 plus years, and to give that up almost like, 10 something years, and to get back to it again. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was
Um,
13 years that I had competed in, and I didn't even think it was possible. I
right,
did that first show, then we did the Jay Cutler, and I won light heavyweights, but didn't win the overall. I sort of had this like, I'm good enough to kind of win, but not win the whole thing. But that lit a fire under my butt of just you're good enough to be here, but you got to work harder because people are beating you. And I viewed it as like, uh, if I have the right plan and I put in more time, I think I had a lot of belief in myself at this point because of the career I had made outside of bodybuilding, that I knew I could outwork people.
right,
And we know a lot of people in this bodybuilding space that have great genetics and are unbelievably lazy.
right,
So I was banking on, I think I can beat these guys because I sure as hell can
right.
outwork them. And then it became going on to these national shows, and eventually I think it was maybe 2021 where I turned pro at Universe, which
Mhm.
I didn't know would be possible because you probably see it in your area in Virginia, and we certainly have it in Boston, of the guys that have been trying to turn pro for 10 years.
Yep.
And they're in their 40s or they're 50. This is going to be the year. And there's something kind of sad about that, because
Yep.
everyone around is like, bro, this shit ain't going to happen for you, and they
Right.
start to look delusional. And I was so scared of being that guy because, as you know, when we go all in on a show, you're making sacrifices in other areas of your
Right.
life. And I was like, do I want to go for this thing of trying to get a pro card and sacrifice other areas? Like, what if it doesn't happen? What if I'm delusional? I don't want to be like these guys. But
Right.
thankfully, it was, I had a lot of trust in our mutual coach, Jose Raymond, that he wasn't bullshitting me, that, if he said I could do it, I could do it. And, we got it done. And now, I'm about to start my third year competing as a IFBB pro.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me see if I can present this. Let's see. I haven't really done this yet, but all right. Can you? All right. Let's see. Are you able to see?
Yeah.
Okay. This is when you turn pro. This picture
No,
on
so
the
the
right.
the one on the left was the very first show I did with Jose that you came to. And then the
Yes.
one on the right was my second pro show.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But it was
That's
whatever period of time, 6 years, 7 years, or whatever it said in there. Just sort of showing the transformation of getting back into bodybuilding
right.
at 37 or 38. And then I
Right.
think the picture on the right is uh 42 or 43.
Wow. Yeah. That's
That I
yeah.
got a lot better,
Yeah.
even into my 40s.
That's amazing transformation. Yeah. You're like you were just getting better. Just looking at it. Um, every year. Um, it's pretty amazing, like how far you have come, like with this. Especially like you weren't whenever you weren't even competing, as you stayed in pretty decent shape. Like I remember that throughout the whole time you ate well and um, worked out pretty regularly, but kind of staying in shape. And that was you just kind of stayed within the program, but even though you weren't serious. But I think
Yeah,
that kind
there's
of
some level, when you get into this of uh you just feel better. Like if I there were times when certainly I would miss a week in the gym when I had that job of 70 gyms and flying around the country, and
right,
I didn't feel good, whether it's that you're not getting the like endorphins going, or there's some level of knowing you're neglecting yourself, kind of
yeah,
subconsciously. But when I got to the gym, I wasn't training with any serious intensity, but I went in and had a chest day and a back day, and did the best I could. It was a lot of Chipotle on the road. At that point, I wasn't serious of like flying with food or anything. It was maybe hit up a Whole Foods or a Chipotle and just get something healthy-ish. But you're able to function better. I'm sure you
right,
realize that, like even in your job, until the carbs get low. But when just eating healthy versus not healthy, um, I think it's very much a underappreciated thing that even someone in just their corporate job can benefit from. When you want to talk about like how do you improve performance in the workplace, just taking care of yourself, of
Right.
eating healthy, getting enough sleep, minimal alcohol, you're going to perform better in whatever your job is.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I actually kind of wanted to talk about, given this month of June, wanted to talk about men's mental health awareness, right? So I feel like this particular field, even in the bodybuilding world, I don't think like people really talk about this. Number one, right? I think it's kind of get shadowed, by other stuff. Well, let me start with this. I think what like in my early 20s till 30s, right? These stuff weren't like I wasn't exposed to it. I never heard about like, not a whole lot of people talk about mental health. At least I didn't hear about it, right? Like people probably was going through it and going seeing their therapist or whatnot, but it wasn't as big as now, right? Everyone on that train of like, you know, having that healthy mental stability to make sure that you're performing better in your life. Um, when did it kick in for you? Like for me, I know I was around like 38, 39, going through shit in life and start to feel a lot more of that I got to deal with this, right? Did you like when did this, like for you at least, when did you hear about it, or like just the awareness of it? Because I feel like post COVID it became a lot bigger, but
Yes.
prior
Yeah.
to that it seems like it wasn't all that, before that.
Yeah. No, probably around COVID, to your point, I think what I would have thought about like someone saying, they're struggling with their mental health or like working with a therapist, right? If I had a friend that's like, oh, I'm seeing a therapist, you think of that as like dealing with an acute problem, right? Like I'm going to a physical therapist to fix this. I'm going to a doctor to treat this. I would have thought like going to a therapist is you're really going through some shit right now that you can't handle and you needed to seek external help for a short period of time, right, to get you through it.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was how I would have viewed it. And I'm sure man, I wish I would have um, viewed it in a more open way when I was younger, because it's like
Right.
times I was going through hard stuff. I guess all we have as guys is we lean on our guy friends. You and I have been very, very close, and I remember when we first met, early on, and I was dating somebody and I went through like a cheating thing, you were there for me, right?
Right.
And I was messed up during that time. It was like the first time I'd ever been cheated on, and I didn't know how to handle it. And shit, I wish I would have gotten a therapist back then.
Right.
But fortunately, I had a good friend like you and some other close friends around that I could really lean on when stuff was hard. And we have that. I think so now. I have a therapist I work with every week, and man, half the time I'm just checking in. And I'm like,
Right.
had an awesome week. Everything was great. Work is good. My training's good. And I keep that damn appointment there every week. As a matter of fact, this past week, the guy was like, do you want to go every other week? Like, like you're so busy and this is costing
Right.
you money. Like, and I was like, no, we can keep
Right.
it. And so it was during COVID. I was in a relationship with somebody struggling with mental health, and we had our difficulties in our relationship. And it became like a lot of, couples that are struggling of let's work with a couples therapist and try to solve our problems.
Mhm.
And so we worked with somebody. I'm pretty sure this was during COVID when this happened. Everything was online. And in the process of that, very early on, it was okay, my partner's going through something. Um, I'm trying to help, but what I'm doing isn't helping, right? I don't have the skills to help this person.
Right.
Let's do couples therapy, and hopefully I can acquire these skills to be a better partner. And in the process, you learn a lot about yourself of just because you're doing something to help somebody, it doesn't mean it's helpful.
Right.
And so for instance, for me, if I'm going through something, what I've always found very helpful is to have somebody that's not emotional that says, okay, let's come up with a plan to fix this, right? Like an action plan. Step one, step two, step three. Um, and in a very logical sense, like if we can just put one foot in front of the other and get moving, you can get out of this hole. And so because that's always been helpful to me, that's what I know. And so that's the help I try to provide for others. If somebody calls me and they're going, okay, let's come up with a solution for this. And what I learned at that time with my partner is she didn't want that. She wasn't asking for that. She
Mm,
wanted a saying, I'm here for you. Like you're going to get through this. You're going to do great. I'm here for you. And to me at the time, I'm like, yeah, but what the hell is that doing? Right? Like there's no action in that.
right.
And so what she needed didn't make sense to me. And I started kind of processing at that time. So fast forward, we worked with this couples therapist for a while. And a lot of what came out of that was me saying, like, hey, I'm trying to be a better person in all levels and just to, be the best person I can be for myself, first and foremost, but also for those close to me. And I don't know what I don't know. And I'm realizing I'm hardwired a certain way, whether it's through childhood experiences and what I learned from my parents, my mom who I lived with, or, things that we go through. If we have very reactive parents, we have learned behaviors to cope as children, right? And we carry that with us later in life, whether it's to withdraw and be silent and get away, or if it's to be reactive ourselves, right? A lot of people,
Right.
it's one way or the other. And I started kind of catching myself, understanding, oh, I'm this way now because of my childhood, and I can work through this. So after the couples therapy stuff, I went and found my own, as like a twofold way. One, to just say, hey, let's lift under the hood and see like what I don't even know could be here that I can work on and be better. There was I want to work on my relationship by working on myself, rather than this couples therapy, we're coming in together. It's, I'm just going to work on me. And by
Right.
working on me and being the best person I can be, hopefully we're better as a couple. And then what it turned into, especially all last year, as I was getting ready for a pro show, was um, managing my emotions when things got really stressful, when bodybuilding required a lot from me, when owning the gym required a lot from me, having a
Mm,
full day of clients required a lot from me. Um, Learning to say no. And that was always hard. I'm always the person that's like, I'll help you, like, what do you need from me? I'll be there for you. It's so important for me to be that guy, but I was running myself thin. So working with the therapist was a lot of work for me of saying, I can say no and it's okay, and I'm not an
right.
asshole and people can understand I can say no this time and still be there for you in other times and working through those emotions. So that's been an ongoing thing for me. That's totally different than how I would have, to sum up your initial question, how I would have viewed mental health or working with a therapist 20 years ago, right? Or
Right.
15 years ago. Now I very much see it just as self improvement. What are the
Right.
roadblocks I have for myself? And sometimes those roadblocks can be um, wanting to be wanting to be a good person. I can get in my own way, right? Because I can't be there for everybody. And if I try to be, I'm going to fail. And
Mm,
most importantly, I'm going to fail in the stuff that matters most to me, by trying to help maybe even distant people around me. So I need to understand what my priorities are. I need to be able to say no often. Now I'm learning more and
right.
more. Like I need to say more often than I think. And so that's a lot of my work now, with this therapist that never would have crossed my mind, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Do you also think this? So as we were growing up, um, I feel like we dealt with a lot, even growing up? And do you think it's a lot to do with also at certain age we just kind of ran out of capacity to deal with? Because we have like it's like our brain is like a storage space, right? You just have certain capacity of taking shit of, and then you just run out of space. You have to figure out how to process certain things and let go. I feel like personally, like there's a lot of hardship I came through, and I never felt like I was, I needed that help. Like I had friends like you or other friends I would talk to, and I'll feel like okay, I'll just deal with it. But I felt like at that certain age, right, 38, 39, started to feel like okay, it's becoming a lot, right? I can't process anxiety, right, which I never experienced. For the first time to experience something like anxiety or panic attack, those are pretty scary because it's not something I have experienced in the past. So when you have to go through it for the first time, you're like, what the hell's wrong with me, right? Like, I don't know if you have gone through that sort of situation,
So
or
I
just
think,
feeling a lot more pressure with all the
yeah,
stuff
well, I
you're going
think
through.
also, you know, I know a little bit about how you grew up, right? And I didn't grow up remotely wealthy, and you're even further away from me in terms of your family coming here with really nothing, right?
Right.
And there's a level of neither you or I ever had a safety net, right?
Yeah.
And there was no option other than to get it done and do it. And
Mhm.
if you're if you had to work two or three jobs uh because your family needed help, right? Like your mom needed help, or you needed to now be the man of the house and step up. I know you were going to do it, right? It's not an option to
Right.
say, "Wow, I'm really stressed right now, and this might be too much for me," right? We
Yeah.
had to bury that shit, and so I think growing up without any safety nets, if we were given an opportunity, you and I both realized how rare that opportunity could be. And maybe we didn't have, the network, the education, the advantages other people had. But what we could do was outwork other people,
Other
right?
people.
And as
Hmm.
long as I've known you, that's always what I've thought is, you had no advantages in life, in terms of, um, growing up with wealthy, influential family members, growing up, with any money, growing up with an education, growing up a minority, right? Like I
Hmm.
still have it good growing up a white guy, right? It's like
Right.
we're not even getting into that. So you had extreme disadvantages, but what you could do is show up and outwork everybody. So
Yep.
I say all that to lay a foundation of, I think for most of our life, there was just not an option, right? This was like survival. People were counting on us. And if we didn't do it, we didn't have a roof over our head, or someone we cared about didn't have a roof over their head. And so, to be blunt, fuck your feelings, and you just
Right.
got to get up
Right.
and do it. And I think you and I both come from that place. However, you get to a point when uh, you have 20 plus years of fuck your feelings, where you've buried the limit under, you've swept under the rug
Right.
uh, uh, everything you could, and you can't sweep anything under the rug anymore,
Right.
and you have to feel your feelings at that point. And I think for both of us, probably that late 30s, early 40s, um, I think you also get to a point where you want to work smarter, not harder, and you
Hmm.
start being more self-aware of, hey, there's got to be a better, you had that point in your life, right, where you were grinding, and you go, there's got to be a better way. I need education, I need training, I
Hmm.
need, right, these
Right.
trades, which opened up a lot of doors for you, and then you worked in that path. um, but there's a point where you go, hey, I got to work smarter here. I can't work 20 hours a day. I need to know what I don't know. I need to learn more. I need to learn from others. And then we start reflecting a little bit. What can I do better? And you start looking at areas of your life where, in that reflection, you realize you have not been taking care of yourself,
Right.
because you didn't put yourself first, right? You put survival first, you put other people first, and then you get to a point where you say, what would it be like if I put myself first? You know, and then now you got to
Right.
deal with everything that's been buried for 20 years.
Yeah, I just like you said, I think, as we're growing up, I don't think that was an option to
Yeah.
even to check in with yourself. Like, hey, you all right? I think now it's a lot more a self-awareness of just knowing or checking, just seeing everyone, like, okay, everyone's talking about it. It's okay to check in with yourself to see if everything's okay. I have, like, no shame to say it. Like, I think I have, therapists for the last 6 years, same therapist. And, just kind of like you, I check in. We may not have nothing to talk about, but I'll just talk about my day or the week or whatnot, right? I mean, just to, and I find that I have a permanent outlet to kind of talk about. If something comes up, great, we'll talk about the shit. But if nothing's there, I'm just checking in.
Yep.
And, and just, again, your therapist kind of become that, that air, the friend, right? Now everyone's busy with their life and stuff, right? Like, people don't have the time to check in with their friends sometimes. But that's that 1 hour block every week. I can dump my shit there and try to process it. What as far I want to kind of get into the bodybuilding world of, I think this is something people don't really talk about. I think they kind of mask their feelings because, you got to be tough. You got to have to go through, um, you know, talk about everything else, training, this and that. But I don't think no one ever really talks about the whole mental peace portion of it, or mental health portion of it. Um, I want to start with, there's a lot of younger guys now, like, obviously, go to the gym, and, they're 18 and probably, on enhancements and all this stuff. How do you think that start to impact people at the early age, right? Like, as they grow older. I feel like they're not fully developed yet, even in their brain,
Yeah.
right? And now they are messing with things that could be potentially impacting their hormones and how they feel, um, whether emotional levels or physical, everything, right? How do you think these guys, like, as they're gonna, next 10 years, right? Like, how does this impact people? At first, they're not even talking about it, right?
Right.
Um, how do you think that's going to impact with all that other?
Yeah. So I think, first, as you talked about the bodybuilding world, to set a foundation, the bodybuilding world as a whole is incredibly conservative, is incredibly, this is what a man is, are you a wolf or are you a sheep? All of these analogies that are just rampant of, if you're a bodybuilder, you need to be tough. You need to push for those extra reps, and who cares if you're not feeling like training today, right? Suck it up and go, right? There's that culture of, um, no one cares about your feelings. Just get the work done. Go to the gym, suck it up, right? So that's the foundation of the culture of bodybuilding, and talking about, often the bodybuilding world is like, screw toxic masculinity. We need more manly men. A man should be like this. A man should be jacked and should be. If somebody, looks at your girl wrong, you should knock the shit out of them. And that's the culture, right?
Right.
And so you have that as a foundation of, this is how you're supposed to be. Now you take, really somebody at any age, but say a younger person who doesn't have control of their emotions yet, and they start taking testosterone, performance enhancing drugs, that puts you right back to like that 15 or 16-year-old going through puberty, right? With high hormone levels,
Right.
where
Right.
we're growing as a child, as a teenager, and you're just raw emotion, right? You're screaming at your parents, you're slamming the door, you're leaving the house, right? You have an overwhelming sense of emotion that you can't control, and a massive part of that is the testosterone forming in your body at that age, right? It's
Right.
just a ball of emotion that you have no control over. Essentially, these kids in their 20s, college kids that say, I want to look like Chris Bumstead, therefore I'm going to get on a bunch of testosterone or other drugs, are now flooding their body all over again with high hormones that, of course, are going to have a psychological reaction.
Right.
An enhanced sex drive, enhanced anger. And if you don't have an ability to control any of these things, you're going to get yourself in some trouble. And it's sort of the thing we see in the gym world, right? Of the trainer trying to sleep with every girl in the gym, the trainer going out to, or the guy on steroids fighting someone in a bar, that kind of roid rage
Mm.
stereotype. While it's not as common as I think people would say, you sort of have the old drug commercials to scare you away, right? It's like, get on steroids and this will happen. Well, it's not guaranteed to happen. But if somebody doesn't have any self-control developed yet in all areas of their life, it's going to cause a problem. And
Right.
you don't know any better. You just don't have self-control. So, for a lot of reasons, this is something that gets asked of Jose and I often in the gym, young kids. And Jose is the best person to speak of it because he was like a world bodybuilding champion, late 20s, early 30s, and still natural. He turned
Right.
pro 8 times, kept turning down his card, but eventually he accepted the pro card and he did his first pro show natural. He won world championships natural, right? And then when he
Right.
finally crossed over and decided to become enhanced, he gained like 20, 30 pounds because he also had a solid foundation of knowing how to train, knowing how to eat, right? And all of those things are we're getting away from mental health, but so important as well, right?
Right.
It's
Right. Right.
not just
Yep.
you take the drugs and you look like Chris Bumstead in 6 months. You have to know how to eat. You have to know how to train. Um, but yeah, these drugs are a nightmare
Mm.
for. I've seen it over and over again of somebody who's natural decides they want to do a bodybuilding show, either thinks they need to do it or just really wants to win and gets on it. And they were already kind of a mess of a person before. They were very reactionary in relationships and friendships, and the guys getting into fights at bars. And when they decide to get on this, it doesn't end well, right? Things always
Yes.
get worse. They
Yep.
they they for sure out of their, end their relationship because they're going to fight all the time. Their life 9 out of 10 times gets way worse because they're so reactionary, right? They do things they later regret. They burn bridges with friendships, with their career, their job. It just comes down to not having, self control developed yet as a skill, and then flooding these hormones, which then make you more reactionary.
Yeah. And then there's the flip side to that, right? There are men also that I've seen that same story, right? And now they're at their late 40s or 50s, and they're taking the enhancements. And I don't know whether if it's more of an addiction, like, okay, well, I don't feel good when I come out, right? I don't like being on TRT or something like that. I need to stay on things and to feel better. And then that also become a not only a health issues, right, because with the age, but I also feel like they're also masking like other issues mentally that might be going through, right? Like might be taking the enhancements to cover that up. Like, well, I feel better when I'm in the gym, um, but not really dealing with maybe have relationship issues or whatever the other issues they're dealing with. But I have seen that side too. You think you know there's also the same case for people like who gets on like maybe later, you know, late 30s, or and then there are people who actually have addiction in general, right? That just
You see a lot of
don't
it, in the bodybuilding world, where it's years ago. I had dated a girl briefly who spoke about she was like a recovered alcoholic, and she was young, so it's like whether or not she was, I don't know, but she believed she was, and she had gone to AA, and didn't drink the whole time we were together. And she asked me one time to go to an AA meeting with her, and I said, okay, if that's important to you, I'll go. And I noticed during the AA meeting, like 80% of the people were chain smoking cigarettes, right? They were like, they were allowed to do that. So they were smoking a pack a day, and they were drinking 10 Red Bulls a day. And they were like incredibly promiscuous, that, you know, like their addiction just transferred over to other things. But it's like, as long as you didn't drink, you're good, you know? And so I
Right.
think some of those people find their way into the bodybuilding world and exercise to an unhealthy amount, start taking performance enhancing drugs to an unhealthy amount, and go to extremes in a very addictive way. But they go, well, I'm not smoking pot and I'm not drinking alcohol, and you know, so this is healthy. I'm working out and I'm eating my chicken and rice,
Right.
and they just transfer an addiction into something else, and ultimately, right, like it's something they need to work on internally. They need to work on their mental health. They need to work on uh, uh, why on their addictive personality and why they have to go all in on something to an unhealthy degree, right? So you absolutely see that from, you know, and then there's whole other areas, right? It's the old uh, you know, cartoon of the skinny kid that gets sand kicked in his face at the beach, and you know, feels bullied, and you know, you gain all this muscle, so now you have all this armor on. No one will ever treat me like that again, right? It's
Right. Right.
ultimately, and or the girl that was chubby and not pretty when she was young and lost weight and started going to the gym, and while there's certainly some gratification in that of you're getting compliments, you're never really fixing the problem, right? Like you're
Right.
that, and I see it all the time as, you know, my livelihood of the really heavy person that loses the weight, while they get addicted to the compliments that come in all of the time because they never had that the first half of their life, there's still that fat guy inside, right? The
Right.
girl that kind of grew up overweight and not attractive, who gets hot later in life and goes to the gym and built up a great body, she's still that really insecure person within that body. Like,
Yep.
even though you did all of this physical work, there's a lot of mental work that needs to be done to be a whole new person inside and out, right? And to um, deal with those insecurities, or the low self-esteem you might have grown up with, just working on your body, whether it's just somebody losing the weight or the extremes of bodybuilding. There's massive body dysmorphia in the bodybuilding world, right? It's
Right.
a whole group of, you know, you start talking when Jose and I did the podcast and we were interviewing all these bodybuilders, you realize very quickly a lot of these people were teased, made fun of, had a very tough childhood, and the gym became a isolating thing, right? I'll show them. Like, it came from that place
Right.
of I'll show them, and while they built an incredible physique out of it, you know, you wonder how happy that person is, you know, even with this physique now, if their mindset is, you know, no one will mess with me now, I'll show them. uh you know, I would argue that's maybe not the end place you want to be.
Right. And I think you know this too. Like, there's a lot of even well-known bodybuilders in the past. You know, either case of suicides or just not even just dealing with their internal issues properly and just suffering through, and whether died from overdose of other drugs or intentional suicidal. Like, those things are pretty scary, and I think again, that's one of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk about this openly, because no one really talks about this, right? They talk about everything else now. Even like people talk about gears enhancements a lot more openly, but not this part, right? Which is the most important part to talk about. That how do you really deal with this?
You know, one of the challenges I faced, uh and once I worked on it on myself, I see how rampant it is with others, is you know, when you talk about competitive bodybuilding and getting into bodybuilding, um Sorry if you hear a vacuum. The gym cleaners are literally
No, that's all
vacuuming outside my office right now. When you talk about competitive bodybuilding, especially when somebody has some early success, um, it can become their identity. And oftentimes things that we do well at and we really dig into become our identity. If a child playing sports and become some type of prodigy in hockey and baseball or whatever, right? Everybody's cheering you on. That becomes kind of your self-worth, right? Like, oh, people value me because I'm good at this thing. And so for me, part of my journey of having some level of winning each show. I might not have won the overall, but I won my height class, weight class, whatever. And then I turned pro, and now you're in really deep waters, So it was a really big deal that I got my pro card, and then I decided to do a show, and New York Pro, you were there, right?
yeah,
And it was a really interesting thing because of my connection with Jose and me kind of being his protege. He was invested in me. We did the podcast together. Some bigger names in the bodybuilding world now knew who I was. And going into my pro debut, the New York Pro, I was on podcasts and people were talking about me, and Jose Raymond's protege is doing the New York Pro and could he win it? And everybody in my gym who had great intentions were like, Nate, I know you can win this. You can win this show. You got this. And I placed 12th place out of like 18 guys. And for me, I viewed it, if I remove the filter of what other people think of me, it was purely okay, this is what I got. Now I have data, I have feedback of how I can get better. Let's get back to work.
hmm
But outside of that now, there was a feeling of like, man, I really let some people down. I disappointed people. People were telling me they thought I could win it, and I got 12th place. I'm on these podcasts, talking about me like I'm a contender, and I'm not even close to that now. And thankfully, because I had, access to a therapist, I could quickly go to this person, being like, here's all this stuff I'm feeling now. Here's the raw emotion. I haven't even processed it, right?
right,
And a lot of it was just I hate letting people down, and I feel like I let people down. And part of it now, in doing the podcast with Jose, out of nowhere, this had kind of become my identity, right? You've known me a long time. I was never bodybuilder Nate this whole time,
right,
right? And so now all of a sudden I'm IFBB pro, and some people only know me as that. And I'm very fortunate to be one of only a handful of pros, in Boston and Massachusetts. So I had a lot of people like cheering me on, of like the hometown guy going to do the show, and I didn't do great, and so I had to kind of deal with that. And one of the things that I thought of was like, dude, I'm a nobody in this sport. What would it be like to be Nick Walker?
hmm
For people who don't know, is at one point was third place at the Mr. Olympia, or name any big bodybuilder. Um, and all of a sudden not do well at a show. And I was thinking how I was feeling, and I'm like, but I'm a nobody in the sport. How hard must it be for these guys, and
right,
and say any sport, to be Tom Brady and have a bad game, to have a bad season, to any athlete with a massive fan base that everyone has an opinion, and now in this era of social media where people can talk shit about you. And I started reflecting on it. It was like, well, thank God that's not me, and it won't be. But wow, this sport could really cripple you
yeah,
if. And so I say all that because there's been a handful of bodybuilders who have died in the last several years, and a few of them by suicide. And I think a lot of this was the pressure you put on yourself to not let people down. These fans that you talk about, like Luke Sandow, and
yeah,
some of these guys that a lot of us were a fan of. The pressure he must have put on himself. Not only that, but this is his livelihood.
hmm
So some bad showings means less income and less you can provide for your kids. And The whole internet saying, "Oh, you looked like shit your last show. You're done. Your career is over." And I don't have to deal with any of that. I'm sure
Right.
Jose, had to. So I say all that to say I had to really stop and reflect at that time. Why am I doing this? This isn't my identity. This is a fucking hobby. Right.
Right.
And like put it into perspective, of this is a hobby that I'm so blessed that I got to this position to do. And I need to keep the perspective of, if this ends tomorrow, I'm not a bodybuilder tomorrow. This isn't my whole identity. But I've
Right.
noticed a lot of local competitors, especially when they have some early success, they win their first show, and now they're going to go on to nationals. It's their entire identity. And
Right.
what you see is, I'm sure you've seen this. Someone does really well at a local show, they
Hmm.
go on to nationals and they get smoked.
Yep.
They don't. You don't know what to do with yourself now, right?
Right.
Because like now you suck, and this thing you put your all into, and that you branded yourself, NPC bodybuilder. Your Instagram page is all about this. You just got your ass kicked. Now you suck. Who are you now?
Right. Right. And that's a lot of information. It's great information you just provided. But you're right. I mean, there's. I mean, I got qualification to go to national every time, but I know I'm gonna get dusted if I go there. So, because at least I want to be like, okay, I feel good enough to go, even if I
Yeah.
take the last spot. You know, to me, it's not worth going now because I don't think I'm there yet. Even because this the best of the best shows up from the country, right? And you're right, the guys that I have who won overall in my shows got last place. You know, in national,
I
and you're
see.
right.
Like I'm fortunate to coach some people that have done well in the local Jay Cutler shows, the regional shows, and I haven't sent them off to national shows
Right.
because a lot of them are young. These are younger kids in their early 20s. I don't think they can handle the rejection.
Yeah.
And who knows, like part of it is you don't know how you're going to place, right? It's completely out of your control of who's going to show up, what the judges will reward. But you have to be able to be a certain maturity level and have a certain level of, um, I guess, self-esteem, right? Outside of the sport, that a bad placing won't derail you, because I've seen it so many times. Someone goes to nationals once, they place really poorly, and they never compete again.
Right.
And so I want to save people. I'd rather keep people back a little bit until I know they have a certain maturity level and can handle it, and are viewing this as a sport of, I want a chance to stand next to the best so I can know how I need to get better. I can very clearly see what my weaknesses are, right? You almost need somebody who has that ability, because if they don't, and they're used to winning, and it's not only like, oh, you didn't win, you got second place, third place, but you got 20th place, and you're
Right.
so far away from winning. Some people, don't have enough resolve in them to work through that, and to say, wow, I'm way back here, let me just get up tomorrow and start working, right, to get better. It's sort of, I'm so bad at this now, I'm so far off, why bother? And then they give up.
Right. And I'm sure it comes with tremendous amount of pressure, and not everyone can handle that pressure like you or me, right? Like I have a full-time job. That's not my career, right? I do it for a hobby.
Yep.
Even if I take the last spot, great. I'll try to do better next year. But I know, some of the people, right, that local, they put everything in, and that's some people don't do, well with the rejection. And the other point he brought up about, Nick Walker, that I know Derek got like a lot of crap. I think his grandmother passed away. There was a lot of comments, and I think I was looking at one of his podcasts. He said, he just had to put the phone down.
Yeah.
I mean, for those type of guys, the amount of pressure, right? Just looking at people talking shit who never even competed their life. They're just talking shit, sitting in there behind their phone. Even he gets, I mean, those guys gets bothered, right, by looking at all this negative comments coming through. It's ruthless. Social media.
It's an interesting, like, you and I didn't grow up with this, right? It's like
Right.
if someone wanted to talk shit to you, they had to say it either to your
On your
face or
face.
to your friend, like, and there's consequences at that point, right? Like,
Right.
whereas an age of like, if you had the balls to say it to my face, like, we can do something about it right here. If you said it to a friend, I'm going to come and find you.
Right.
Now we're in an era where, people have anonymous usernames on Instagram with accounts with no photos, and there's such a degree of protection of anonymity that, no one's going to know who I am, or, people will go right on to Derek Lunsford's account and say, you suck, Nick Walker should have beat you, you look
Right.
terrible, under their account, being like, what's Derek going to do about it? This person's in Texas,
Right. Right.
and yeah, man, I only had it, when you have a little bit of a following. Of course, I would have some people pop on my account here and there that are like, you look like shit or whatever, but I don't have hardly any of those. I can't even imagine. It's tough because, in this era of bodybuilding, you make your living through social media. And so you almost, if you want to monetize yourself and get sponsorships, you have to do it.
Right.
But with that comes all of the bad, right? Of
Mhm.
everyone has an opinion and they're going to say horrible things because there aren't consequences. Um, I'm glad I don't do it for a living, because it would be, even with the self improvement work I've done, it would be incredibly challenging to wake up every day,
Yeah.
open up your Instagram, and have dozens of hateful comments that you have to face every day. Like, and early on, I remember, reading a quote. I don't know if it was from Gary Vee, who's, I follow on Instagram. It's a someone who's waking up and putting in the work and doing the thing. Jay Cutler's not going on people's accounts talking trash, telling them they
Right.
suck, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's people who are not in a good place in their own mental health, who are doing this. And it was Gary Vee was talking about, look, every day I open up my account and people are telling me, you suck, you're terrible, I hate you. He's like, I feel really bad for these people. He's like, early on, it's very easy to get angry, right? Somebody's saying some really hurtful stuff about something, you're putting out into the world, you're passionate about. This could be the case for a musician, as you are, as I am, bodybuilding, anything. And he's like, you realize the person who's doing that is not in a good place in their life. They're not in a good place in their mental health. They're probably not in a good place in their career, in their friendships, in their relationships. Nobody in a good place in their life is taking time out of their day to just leave hateful comments on people's accounts,
Right.
And so, but it's hard because it's reactive, it's you open up your Instagram account and it's really hateful comments. It's hard not to feel that and feel bad
Yeah.
about that, or or be angry and want to come back at that person. It takes so much restraint and self-reflection to say, you know uh, um, no good comes from me trying to retaliate or trying to leave a remark to this person, right? They're clearly not in a good place.
Right.
I'm not going to talk sense into them, nor am I going to uh, uh, play in the mud and say hurtful shit to them that will somehow make me feel better. You got to leave it alone. But it's I feel for these bodybuilders, or really anybody, right, that has to use social media as an influencer for their career, because you have to find some way to deal with that.
Yep. Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, I don't entertain those at all. Not that I have that many followers to begin with, and I don't care for it, but even like, here and there, people will, if you leave a comment on someone else's page or something, someone will come back and say some shit to you. I'm like, it's not worth even a second of my time,
Yeah.
or letting them have my energy in that
Yep.
case, right? Like,
Yep.
it's just not worth it. Yeah, good talk, man. Man, I appreciate you coming through. Um, just putting your Instagram tag is Nate Telow. People wants to follow. You do online coaching, right? Online coaching,
Yep. In-person
personal
training in
training.
Boston and online coaching people all around the world.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you coming through. This was great. Hope to bring you back at some point soon. Talk about something else. But thank you.
Sounds good, man. My pleasure.
Appreciate it. All right.